Welcome to I've Never Read Discworld. My name is Andy Luke, and I haven't read tonight's book, Sourcery.
Hello, hello. My name is P.J. Hart, and I also had not read this week's book, Sourcery. So this is the first of the books, for those who've been listening along, that I skipped on my initial read of Discworld. We'll get into why a little bit later. So things are going to change format-wise a little bit as we go, but you'll figure it out. You're all grown-ups. You're all smart people. I will let Andrew continue with our introductions.
I was just going to ask, how was your Christmas, PJ?
It was okay. My car died. That wasn't great on Boxing Day. Other than that, we did all the usual things. Drank lots of drinks, ate lots of food. Kids opened lots of presents. And that was good. Yeah, yourself?
It was fairly quiet. Just enjoying the silence from the busy roadway outside with a few friends on the internet. Watching the Always Sunny Christmas special, the Peep Show Christmas special.
Nice. We watched the Motherland Christmas special, which was a bit darker than I anticipated, but it was very good.
We also got the Misfits Christmas special.
Awesome.
Did a Misfits rewatch.
Class. Great. Yes, why not? Absolutely. Fantastic. And that's what it's really all about. And I feel actually like I neglected television this year a bit. Just doing my own career any favors, I'm sure. So yes, everybody make sure you watch as much television as humanly possible over Christmas so that people like me can keep their jobs.
So we go through each of the Discworld books. Usually I haven't read any, but tonight is both our first reading of Sourcery. I'm going to begin. I have a shocking revelation for you.
He's been teasing me with this. I'm as eager to hear it as you are.
So I came across a Facebook post from Peter Dunn of the Belfast science fiction fantasy group.
Oh yes.
From an event called Unicon 89, held at Queen's University, where Terry Pratchett was a guest of honor.
Oh my!
And that was my first ever con, and I have been in his presence.
Wow! Check it out.
Completely what buried memory.
And what then? What bubbled to the surface when you learned that then? So what? Talk me through it.
The hat. The hat was there. The room was noticeably fuller for Terry than any other guest. I mean, Harry Harrison was there. I don't remember much because I hadn't read even Good Omens back then.
I would have just been out.
Yeah, there was the Pratchett fever. It was a big con for me because it was my first con. There was a comics workshop where I had my first ever comic script drawn.
Awesome.
By the late lamented Ivor Lightning Lavery from Belfast, who drew me a one-page thing. The workshop was run by Hilary Robinson, very popular in 2008 at the time from Bangor. John McCrae, who was just sort of breaking out with Troubled Souls.
Oh yeah, of course.
Davy Francis, who's like a bit of a local legend in cartooning since the 70s. But yeah, I really don't remember much in Terry Pratchett that I can give to you. Although I will cap the first comic strip story with the tale that 2 or 3 weeks later, a poster tube arrived through my door, and Ivor Lightning Lavery had sent me the original art that he had drawn.
Wow, have you still got it?
Really nice. I don't, I'm afraid.
Dude,
it's lost to time.
It's a great story nonetheless. How about that then? So obviously something buried in the back of your mind there with Terry Pratchett and Discworld, and it's taken you this long to circle back around, but better late than never.
And it was like, it was a very, yeah.
Was this an old student union?
It was, yeah. Opposite, just up from the university in a sort of separate building, opposite where the Queen's restaurant is now. And obviously,
yes,
Terry was like one of the sort of the big wigs from Queen's science fiction thing. They were particularly overly prepared for it, with all due respect. So brilliant. Yeah, and everybody had a great day. And I don't know if Peter Dunn's post is private or public on the Belfast science fiction fantasy group, but it's quite a long one. It's worth searching out. He talks about Terry and his attitude to Belfast and the university and
Oh, that would be
religion.
interesting. Yeah. I
We
wonder
might
if he
put
would
that
let us republish it, possibly, if we could share that on our socials. I think that
possibly,
would be
yeah.
interesting.
If it's public, I'll post it in the links below.
Fantastic.
Sourcery, first published 26th of May, 1988 by Victor Galans in association with Colin Smythe. There was an eighth son of an eighth son. He was quite naturally a wizard, and there it should have ended. However, for reasons we'd better not go into, he had 7 sons, and then he had an eighth son, a wizard squared, a source of magic, a sorcerer. Sourcery sees a return of Rincewind and the luggage as the Discworld faces its greatest and funniest challenge yet.
Ooh, bit more of a sheen on that marketing blurb.
Yeah,
But wizards again, back to wizards.
it's plenty funny, but it's plenty drama too.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big as you can get from that blurb, and I guess Terry's given up the day job for the last book. He's going all in. So yeah, this is a big crisis sort of level event for the Discworld. It almost feels, without giving too much away too early. So first impression. Oh yeah. So this is weird because I guess usually because I've already read it, I'll ask Andy his first impressions, but he read this one well before Christmas,
a couple of weeks before you. Yeah, I took it to Amsterdam.
Yeah, so you may have seen some photos on our socials of Andy sexily reading his books in the photogenic landscape of Amsterdam in winter, whereas I didn't really catch up till just after the holidays, and I kind of blew through it in about a week. So yeah, so the tables have turned. So ask away, Master.
What did you think of this one? Did it deliver the Discworld essence?
For me, no. Not really. So I sort of knew this was going to happen though. Like I knew it was coming, that the first book, if we're going chronological, that I hadn't read was going to be a Rincewind book. And we've talked before sort of about how I feel about that. I'm reevaluating the series a little bit in terms of Rincewind as a character, but like there's just no getting around the fact that like the series and the world are still kind of being molded at this part in the series, and I'm just really impatient for the Discworld that I know and love, which is like coming into being and it's coming into focus, but like that's happening kind of book by book, and in a weird kind of way this almost feels like a little step back for me.
Yeah.
Like Mort and death and that stuff felt a bit more, I mentioned it last time, a bit more fully realized, whereas the wizard stuff feels a bit more like it's its own thing. That's like separate from what this world is going to become, like this kind of little series of I guess I don't really even know how to describe it, but all these stories where it's like Rincewind and some magical MacGuffin and then a battle against some extra dimensional weirdos, like that seems to be like a structure that we're gonna hopefully later break out of, and I feel like we've just stepped back into it for this
well
book.
I think I know where you're coming from with this, and I kind of had we're going talking about the broader thing, but the first 20 pages and you kind of know from the first scene that there's another apocalypse coming.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, right, okay, we're book 5, book 4. All the books except one, Equal Rights, have had an apocalypse, and I'm a bit tired at this point. But what makes Sourcery incredibly different is by page 20, we're in the apocalypse, and it lasts for the whole of the book. And I really love that conceit that it
Cool.
hits the ground running.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm actually really glad, because I feel that definitely reading this book late, like coming back to this book and reading it after I've read almost all the rest, like is definitely doing it a disservice. Because like you say, we spent the whole book in an apocalypse, but there's like 35 more books so I know that the world doesn't end. Do you know what I mean?
And also, you don't always want to hear your new favorite bands like early work. You want to hear their latest stuff.
So yeah, sometimes I guess sometimes the hits are good too. Where I think we haven't, for me, to use that analogy, like we're still in like the demo stage, in the rough kind of stage, where like we're gonna get to like that first platinum album in a few books, and then the tone of this conversation is gonna change big time. Yeah, but for me, like this, I guess as well, just that weight of expectation of being like, right, this is a Discworld book that I haven't read. It's one of my favorite series. So there is obviously a weight of expectation there, but that is kind of counterbalanced by the fact that it's an early book and it's dealing with characters that I know that I don't necessarily love. So it's a complicated one for me. So you're sorry you asked for my first impressions now.
Okay, so let's break it down into like 5 parts. First 80 pages, prelude and sorcery. Arch-Chancellor Coin arrives, leaving Death and a lizard in his wake. A hat talks to Rincewind, and a thief takes him to the Shades.
Great.
So,
Yeah. Similarly, actually, to Mort, I guess. Like he does tend to start strong, even in these early books. They do start strong. I think, like you say, by 20 pages, we're in an apocalypse, and that is kind of like, it's a cool concept for sure. And the characters we meet earliest, Coin is and Ipslor, Coin's dad, who we learned about in the blurb. That's a cool idea. Like this learning about like the ancient history of the Discworld, like the Mage Wars and like magic running rampant, is like not something that was like big in my kind of understanding, I guess, of the lore of Discworld. You know, my kind of impression of it when I think about it is that it's a lot more grounded. It's like it's real people living in a fantasy world, but like this story is like a fantasy story with like a capital F, isn't it?
we've had this sort of attempt of characters cheating death, and this is the most sort of, or trying to, and this is the most explicit of it. You get the notion that Ipsor and pretty much straight away Coin are pretty screwed up. I can visualize what Coin looks like. He's Daniel in the later Sandman books. He's this sort of dangerous little child with crazy powers all around him, and he comes into the university and kind of shatters the old ways things are done, shows everybody up straight from the get-go. There's almost a hint of that sort of working class, or at least breaking into an institution, a place where you're not supposed to be. But Coin sort of doesn't really take any prisoners.
No, and this early stuff with Coin is great, and I sort of wish we spent a bit more time with him as the book went on, because like you say, you know, you can kind of picture him. He's a disruptor. He's changing things. It's great to see the senior wizards on the back feet always. So yeah, like even though we don't spend enough time with them, in my view, I thought this early stuff was all pretty promising. Yeah, like and that idea of Ipslor, like his dad is in the staff, and they're obviously end up at odds. Like he's kind of controlling his son through the staff, like that kind of parental conflict from beyond the grave. Like that feels like a Discworld story engine, but we don't come back to it enough. I think we have a bit of it at the start, we have a bit of it at the end, and it sort of gets lost a bit in the middle. So that's a shame. But great building blocks as always, and of course, nice to see the librarian kind of emerging in what I would consider to be sort of close to his final form. I was wondering what the props were going to be. There it is.
For audio listeners, I'm enjoying a banana right now, which should please some of my fan base.
Should have thought of that.
So what I was trying to work out, we talked about the librarian a bit last time.
Yeah.
And I know in the TV adaptation of the first 2 books, we saw the librarian get changed into a monkey. Was that actually in the novelization? Or the
yep. You'll twist your head off if you call him a monkey. Was it? Yeah, it's in the Light Fantastic. So it sort of happens almost as like a side note in the Light Fantastic, and then just commit to it. Like he's in a lot of books. So he just stays as an ape for the entirety of the series for the next 40 plus books, which is awesome. So yeah, so this is the first time he kind of takes like a proper active role in one of the stories as like the ape librarian, which is great.
Yeah,
I love that
really fleshed out here.
He's like an R2 unit, you know, he's like R2D2, where like it doesn't matter what monosyllabic noises he makes, like, you know, which characters understand them or which don't is just like, it's just plot dependent. Or Chewbacca actually might have been a better reference there. We can edit those out selectively. So yeah, so I mean, yeah, great to see the librarian come into his own. Any other kind of character flaws in this book can probably be forgiven just for that.
And we have a Coin summons a governmental figure to turn him into the lizard. You mentioned this. Did you mention this person?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the patrician is going to play a bigger part in the series as a whole. We've met him briefly before. He's threatened Rincewind to look after Two Flower. Then I think he decided to try to kill Two Flower or something like that. Yeah, so it's weird to see him just be this kind of side note in this story where he just gets turned into a lizard. He plays like much more active roles in later stories that I read before this. So we're like, oh shit, the patrician got turned into a lizard. So like, he's definitely gonna take revenge for that, or like there's going to be consequences for that, but there isn't, because like the consequences are actually world ending. They're like so much bigger than him, and that's quite unusual for the way the patrician is kind of usually deployed in these stories. So that was interesting. And Waffles, the patrician's dog, I think is the first appearance of Waffles, and despite how he's portrayed in this book, he actually sticks around for a few more books despite his advanced years. So that was kind of fun. So yeah, so like I was saying, you know, starting to see the world is coalescing. The Discworld that I know and love, it, like there are still key elements, particularly the librarian, less so Waffles, that are kind of first seen or first kind of like properly fleshed out in this book. So,
well, I was very pleased to see the return of Rincewind, that I'd grown rather fond of, and even more oddly surprised, because I'd forgotten the luggage was attached to him.
yeah,
To see the luggage return in full glory. I think Rincewind is, I mean, the luggage is still the luggage, and I think Rincewind is much more accurate in the little bitching I was doing about his portrayal in Mort. He's still pretty much maybe a coward, somebody who doesn't really want the responsibility of being a hero, who'll do the right thing, and who just has a habit of getting himself into positions he doesn't want to be in.
Yeah, typically it starts with Rincewind senses that something really bad's going to happen, so he wants to run away from it. So, yeah, to be fair, like that kind of character trait of Rincewind's that always kind of turned me off slightly when I was younger, that he is a coward. Like, I think that is used better in this story because it's the fact that he senses danger coming before everybody else, because he is like nature's born survivor. His first instinct is always to run away. Because of that, that's what attaches the Arch Chancellor's hat. Goes, right, this guy's getting out of here. He's getting out of Dodge. I need to go with him. So it actually like makes sense for the story. So yeah, I think he's kind of like, he's finding ways to make Rincewind a bit more active in the stories and stuff. But which does work here.
There's a duality to the card, of course, which is the explorer. So he's helping us map the Discworld.
True. Yeah, oh yeah. So this is the first time we really spend any meaningful time in Clutch, I suppose. Is that what you're leading up to?
Yeah. We get to see a bit more of Ankh Park. We were going into the Shades.
Yeah, we were in the Shades with Mort, and we get to go back. It's like, this is what the Shades is like for somebody who doesn't have magical powers, or well, at least not good magical powers like Mort does. And of course, that's where we meet Kanina as well.
So before we divert from the university, we get quite a lot of wizards about. We get Spelter and Marmaric Carding, who are, I think, if I remember rightly, the Bursar Spelter is kind of very untrusting of Coin, whereas Carding is sort of all quite happy to give him, give him his way. And Carding goes on a full arc in his story because he is just by the end of the story, I think his downfall comes from opposition to coin, and it's a very conscious downfall. He has made his decision. He's no longer enabling this kid. This kid's a mentalist.
It has some kind of connotations for modern politics, I think, doesn't it? In terms of coattail riding and populism and things like that.
Yeah, you can. Well, Carding could very much be one of the 60 MPs who resigned to see Boris Johnson go. It has to be said that Carding made him what he is. He backed coin.
But that regret, I think there is something in that feels quite prescient. Is that if you back a populist like coin, your days are numbered. That you'll come to regret it. And yeah, that's embodied in Carding's decision. But clear also in Spelter, where like just being against the groupthink. Even though like what he's seeing and what he understands the situation to be is quite clear that it's out of control. Like if nobody else around you thinks that, or if they're benefiting from that lack of control, that you're the crazy one, not them. I think we've seen a lot of that in the world recently.
So pages 80 to 140, the very scene university. Coin modernizes university and the staff disposes of Spelter. Rincewind, Kanina, and the luggage fight pirates on their way to Alkali, Clatch, where they are taken hostage by Seraph Creosote.
A lot going on. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's a lot.
And Kanina, yeah. So Kanina, who steals the hat and all the rest of it. Cohen, the barbarian's daughter. I'm gonna have to put it back on you. Like, what do you think?
I've got mixed feelings with Kanina. Her introduction is fabulous. She's that classic female. She's not an assassin, but she is. She's a cat thief.
Yeah,
she's a black cat.
Exactly.
And she's very good at it and very funny. And then as it goes on through the book, we get more and more about her time as a hairdresser. I think that's meant to be the joke, that she's a ninja, but also a hairdresser. And it doesn't really, it's
yeah, it doesn't quite coalesce. I agree with that. I think it's because it's one thing too many. So like, obviously she sort of has to be a good thief. She has to be the cat burglar character to service the plot, to steal the hat and give it to Rincewind and all that. But that kind of dilutes the concept of the joke that Terry's trying to set up, which is that she wants nothing more in life. She's an ordinary person who wants nothing more in life than to be a hairdresser, but her genetics are calling her to do barbarian things. But the fact that she's a cat burglar kind of sits in the middle.
Yeah, and the cat burglar thing seems to be or is set up as her passion, or chief. She does it for the artistry rather than the money.
Yeah, and she's super, super good at it. So yeah, so I would agree with that. The hairdresser thing seems pretty superfluous, and like it undermines her character a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she can be a cat burglar and still not want to be a barbarian. She just maybe she loves that big city life, she just likes being in Nightmare Park and drinking fancy coffees and stealing expensive hats. Like, why can't it just be that,
Alkali is pretty much run by the Seraph Creosote, who, as we, on the route to meeting him, sounds like a very powerful, tyrannical figure. And he's just a guy who writes bad poetry and is quite charming and quite a lot of fun. I really like Creosote.
Yeah, I think Terry did too. I feel that we end up spending more time than you might have initially planned when he was mapping this book out. Just probably because he was quite fun to write. So he starts out a bit as an Arabian Nights spoof, I guess. He has all these handmaidens and he wants them to tell him stories, and that's a bit sexy apparently, and that's obviously an Arabian Nights send up. And he's got more riches than anybody, and he doesn't know what to do with them, and it's all kind of, all those myths are kind of coalescing around this kind of character, and he's sending them up a bit, but I don't think he's satirizing them necessarily. I don't think he has a point. He's not trying to make a particular point about that kind of literature or anything like that. It's interesting that he makes him a really bad poet. It's got kind of Hitchhiker's vibes, I think.
I think. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say it's a joke that you can maybe do once or twice, but nobody really wants to spend their time reading bad poetry.
I think your earlier point about the problematic, maybe you didn't make this point and it's in some kind of time flux, the problematic satirizing of the fantasy trope, you told me earlier. I think that really comes across in Alkali generally. It's a satirization of the that I finished my sentence for me.
Yeah, so it's Arabian. It's
Arabian
like,
Nights.
yeah, Arabian mythology, I guess. Yeah, or Middle Eastern mythology. Yeah, but to what end? I don't really understand.
It milks it. It milks it really.
It does, and
It's
I'll
good, but
I'll forgive it because I know that we come back and we do it better. I say we, like I've got anything to do with it. Terry comes back. Terry comes back and does it better in a few books' time, and like,
you know, all the description is fantastic of it though.
yeah, oh yeah, like it's a good setting, like for the adventure, I guess, that they have, and there are some kind of fun bits in it, especially like the Indiana Jones tries. He's eating the banana. I got that's killing me. Right, stay focused. Yeah, so like the Indiana Jones style traps and Nigel the Barbarian and that kind of stuff. Like I do quite like that stuff.
Yeah, Rincewind is stuck in a snake pit with
Oh
one
yeah,
snake who's actually quite friendly
yeah.
and is looking to get out of the snake pit himself.
Why
Cue
wouldn't you?
Nigel the Destroyer.
Yeah. Oh, Nigel, sorry, Nigel the Destroyer, not Nigel the Barbarian. Give him his due. Yeah. So right, finally with Nigel, it's like it's a character that I think feels like Discworldy. You know, it's a kid who like got a correspondence course about barbarianing and decided that's what you do. You look up chapter 14 and all the rest of it. And of course it's Cohen, the barbarian, that's written it. It's our mate Cohen, who's like made a quick buck probably by getting some intern to write his correspondence course for him. So that all feels like a bit more grounded and a bit more like, you know, wink wink nudge nudge kind of Discworld stuff that I like.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for anything that plays about with the Charles Atlas. I made a man out of Mac cartoons,
Oh, okay.
advertisements, and yeah, it's right
Yeah.
good.
And to be like, you know how I feel generally about barbarians by now. I was like, I'm rolling my eyes a little bit. Like, there's another barbarian coming in here. But like, Nigel totally won me over. I guess, do you know what part of it is? It's because he's like a good foil for Rincewind, like almost like a better foil than Tuflar was, because like he is actually the opposite. Like, he wants to run towards danger, even though he's clueless. Whereas Rincewind wants to run away from danger because he knows exactly what's going to happen. So they work. I think they work really well together. So
That's
yeah,
a really good point.
yeah. Thanks.
And I think you actually get a lovely synergy between these three characters because Kanina really can't stand him, and he's fixated on her.
Yeah,
It's a kind of warped love triangle going on.
yeah, and I think that is maybe why I find it a bit odd that Creosote kind of hitches a ride with him. Like he leaves, you know, whenever everything goes kind of apocalyptic and clutch, and Creosote leaves with him. I'm kind of like, yeah, it feels unbalanced in a way. Like I don't know what his role in that kind of. Obviously, it's no longer a love triangle. Oh well, he fancies Kanina too, but like that just seems like his default when it comes to women generally. So
He's the did you use the word apprentice? He's a youth training scheme barbarian. Yeah, he has a sort of a lovable innocence or ignorance about him.
I mean, yeah, he's really the opposite of Cohen. You know, we've seen a few different barbarian portrayals. So this, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with Nigel for sure. So you,
I just wanted to mention so I had a brief look into the changes in UK universities. There's a theme in this book and would have been on Terry's mind at this point. And so just off the top of my head, it was a bit of a period of rapid expansion in the late 60s, 70s, and again in the 80s. And what you get about the time Sourcery is written, which I think is, let me just check, about 88 maybe?
yeah,
Yeah.
published in '88. So yeah,
So there was a binary divide between universities and polytechnics.
yeah,
So that when 1992 rolls around, universities running before them were known as old universities, and post 92 new universities. The amount of universities in the UK nearly doubled around this point, and you're also seeing greater links to student performance and efficiency. More students coming in expanding, but funding just dropping. And what you get as well is the sort of you've got maintenance grants in 85, but they're just about to be frozen. And you've also got the commercialization of universities. So you're seeing more vending machines going in, more of that sort of selling university brands. This is when it all begins to happen, which I think parallels quite nicely with what Coin is doing. We're both in and around the University of Ulster, and which has one main building and two new ones, and I was recounting to somebody the amount of eateries and cafes in these three buildings, and 8 is a number I came up with.
That seems about right. Just on York Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems, because they were, just as I was finishing up last term, they just literally just opened a new one. And it's like, what? There's literally one like up the stairs, like 2 floors above us right now. You're opening one on the ground floor. So yeah, it's mad that and as much as I actually I do like, I like being back at university last term and seeing the shiny new stuff in Ulster, but it feels like it's been a lot of money spent on it, and that money has to come from somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's not a context I'd really considered when I was reading it, but I guess he comes back to Unseen University again and again, and because you're right, he obviously has something to say about higher education, so that is interesting.
So it's administrators are all about their marketing and their corporate stuff, which is definitely with Coin's agenda that he wants the university to be seen across the Discworld. He wants it to be the big thing. And similarly, there's a tendency, certainly a debate between vocationalism, and there's a decline in the humanities, which starts in the 80s. And that's Coin's agenda too, I think. Ipslors.
Well, yeah, I guess it's always worth reminding ourselves, that Coin is kind of under Ipslor's kind of control for this book, most of this book, and there is that one moment of vulnerability that we kind of that Spelter witnesses. Is it around this part of the book, maybe slightly after, where we see that the staff is essentially abusing him, is physically abusing the child, and you're kind of oh shit, this is kind of real, and as much as fun and as funny as all this wizard stuff is, you're there's kind of a story about a kid who's lost his agency, and that is going to come back whenever he finally gets to meet Rincewind. But I wish we'd had a little bit more of that. I don't mind.
I think so too. I think Terry's on to something there. Now, maybe part of the reason it works is that the staff is telling off the son in the bedroom and shouting, and it's a little sinister. And then we have the staff chasing Spelter down corridors before it kills him. And there's that theme of domestic abuse running through at 1988. I mean, Childline was pretty massive. Esther Ransom.
Let's be honest, it's a tough subject to tackle in a comedy book. There's no two ways about that, even for a master like Terry. So
yeah, but I think it's. I mean, we're getting to it more in the finale, but the subject of domestic abuse is certainly one he wants to talk about.
Yeah, I get the impression I'm always going to be saying this until we get there, but in later books, I sort of feel that more serious topics, maybe not quite as serious as this, but certainly topics that come close, do get dealt with and are handled really deftly and really well, and then in ways that do still make you laugh, but also make you think, So yeah, I feel that he's trying to walk up to it here, maybe, but has probably rightly decided to kind of step back a little bit, because this is a really sensitive one.
Do you want to talk about pages 140 to 200? The Clutch Apocalypse?
Absolutely. So, yes.
Like the word Clutch Apocalypse.
I love it. Yeah, it really rolls off the tongue. The Clutchopocalypse? No. Can't do it. Okay.
No, like it.
So here's what happens. The luggage gets drunk and mourns unrequited love. Rincewind is placed in a pit of snake and is helped to escape by Nigel, Herbert, the destroyer, son of what's his dad called? Something. He's a grocer. I loved it at the time. I should have made a note. The wizards try to burn down the library. Grand Vizier Abram's power play is all hot. That's a good line. And the magic war reaches clutch, impeded escape by Carpet. So a lot, I mean, fair enough. A lot happens here. Is that really everything? That's only 60 pages. Does that all that really happen in 60 pages? That's huge. So where to begin? Yeah, we mentioned the pit of snake, the single snake. That was great. Love that. We've talked about Nigel a little bit. Oh yeah, the library. So we were like, oh yeah, we were all big for the librarian finally getting to do some stuff. And
Yes.
as much as the magical world building and the mage wars and blah blah blah, I'm like, I can take or leave it. Like every now and again, he's on his second banana. No, guys, banana number. You got to be careful, but too much potassium is actually bad for you.
Really?
Like, I don't know. I got a single science GCSE.
So the librarian is organizing.
So the library. So what I was going to say about the library before you started eating the banana and distracted me was that like it makes sense to me. Like when he comes up with these little magical rules, like that make you go, oh yeah, like that makes sense in the kind of the world that you've created. So that you can't use magic on the magic books. If you want to destroy the magic library, you gotta get a book of matches, and you gotta do it old school. So I thought that was quite good, and that set piece worked. Like, you know, because of these wizards who are now all powerful, essentially, couldn't just walk in and go fireball, burn down the library, and the rules that were set up for that made sense, and it added to the story, and it gave the librarian his like ninja moment to come and like mess them all up, and that was awesome. But also in this section, or around this time in the book, we're starting to have to like find reasons why the luggage isn't just saving Rincewind. Because like the luggage can't be killed, it can't be stopped. So like Rincewind's in the middle of an apocalypse, his life's in danger everywhere he looks. Like the luggage should just come and save him, or at least come and help him, right? So yeah, so the idea that the luggage falls in love with Kadina is basically what happens, which is kind of a funny idea.
Yeah, and it's not just a one note. He does do something with it. The luggage goes to the bar and gets drunk.
Yeah, but I do feel that these are just like elaborate ways to keep the luggage from saving the day.
One of the most powerful characters.
Yeah,
in the top three.
Definitely at this stage in the series for sure. Funnily enough, though, like having the luggage go get drunk, I didn't mind as much, but because there's always a scene or sequence in a Discworld book, certainly by this point in the series, where somebody just goes and gets pissed. I know because Mort does it, doesn't he? Death does it. Rincewind has done it, I think, on multiple occasions. So that's fine. I don't mind that so much. I thought having the luggage wander the desert fighting basilisks and stuff was a bit thinner, maybe.
Yeah, I'm scratching my head from memory a bit, but the luggage falls afoul of the major warfare and gets buried under things and knocked over and swims.
Yeah, and there's these like there's
well,
he has to fight mythical creatures and he floats down a river and all this, and he's hungover the whole time. I don't know why he's a he. He's a box. It's a box.
I mean, I suppose it's quite contrary to the love in the bar scenes, but here we get the luggage as the indestructible victim of warfare, and we are full on a Discworld war here.
Yeah, and I did find that surprising because like there's again, I keep going on about it, but Discworld tends to be quite grounded for me. So yeah, the fact that there's like a global war going on in the disc, like that is refreshing. That is different for sure. And maybe I did, my natural reaction was to kind of recoil from it, but you know, talking it over again and talking it over with you, who you obviously engage with it a bit better. I'm coming around to the idea, you know, like it has obviously got potential.
Yeah, one of the issues that came up was so we're seeing I'm seeing an awful lot more of the Discworld for the first time, and places are starting to cement. And I'm kind of, and this is not a problem with Terry. This is a problem with myself. I'm wondering how well I'm going to be able to map this stuff. And I'm very aware that there's a number of Discworld map books about. And should I go and when should I go and check these out?
I mean, if you want, I don't have a particularly good idea of like where, even now, of like where stuff is on Discworld. So like Ankmore Park is on the plains and there's a river, and Stohelet and Stolat are kind of in the general vicinity. There's a sea, Clatches over the sea somewhere, and then there's the ramparts and Lanker and all that stuff, which in my head is over here for some reason. And that's it. And then Uberwald, which we won't talk about yet because it hasn't been invented.
Well, maybe not sweat the geek details too soon.
Yeah, but I don't like that. That is a fantasy thing where like it's like a Lord of the Rings thing, isn't it? Where like you open the book and there's a map. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't care about the map really. Like,
but I'm sure with Terry stuff, yeah, the maps have got to be some fun.
oh, totally, and they are beautiful. Like the ones that they've produced are awesome. Like they're worth a look at, even just as from an aesthetic point of view, for sure.
So, Grand Vizier Abram, who's the snivelly creosote, snivelly administrator, who's got plans of his own.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's Jafar kind of. This probably predates Disney's Aladdin, though, doesn't it? Yeah, it would, because this is the 80s. So yeah, so yeah, obviously the conniving Grand Vizier is like again a Middle Eastern mythological trope. It's the joke on him is that his plan gets usurped like immediately by a hat. It's quite funny. He finds a magical relic that he thinks is going to give him unrivaled power, and he puts it on, and it just wipes his mind and takes him over. So yeah, I again, when you do sort of stop and think and talk it out, some of the gags that are based on this mythology are obviously quite clever. Ook indeed. I probably I see him as a more important character for the plot, maybe even than Creosote is, because he is a recognizable trope to us, and that trope is subverted and it serves the plot in a way that Creosote doesn't. Maybe, I don't know.
I got a little bit confused with how much of Abram is in control of the hat and vice versa, and Abram's own fate. And I don't know if it is incoherent writing, or if it's just the fact that warfare is messy and it's confusing and you can't see people in front of you, and there's an awful lot going on in this book.
Exactly.
But that's by terms of design.
I would think so, but I think it does have a little bit of that like overpowered magical character problem where like they're literally like, this is a war that's taking place in the nature of reality. So which is like a difficult thing to keep track of. Like you said, normal warfare, it's a difficult thing to keep track of. And like these guys are literally bending the shape of the universe in their war. So yeah, like this is also where it started to get a little bit bogged down for me in terms of like the ceilings are turning to jelly and all this kind of stuff. And it's hard to kind of keep track what's happening in terms of who's fighting and who's winning. And yeah. So no, so I get it. I think you're right. I think it does get a little bit bogged down in the magical war at this point. And I'm not super fussed about that because I know that Discworld continues, like the world doesn't end and it doesn't look like this in a couple of books' time. So it's hard to invest, I guess,
Bringing in a bit of real world. I mean, at this time with the bombing of Libya was a couple of years before. It still had apartheid in South Africa, the troubles in Northern Ireland, a murderous low scale, high intensity conflict with a name like something Terry might have made up in a silly minute.
The joke's on us.
It's just to be troubles, man.
Yeah, it's weird to think about the late 80s as a turbulent time, but it was.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
Certainly.
And I guess...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess that's something, Terry's background in journalism and that, he would definitely have recognized the sort of thinking specifically about like Afghanistan, that something probably did feel like it was coming to an end, the Soviet Empire and all that. Like that felt the chaos that ensued from that, you can sort of feel a little bit of that in the chaos that we were just discussing and that we read about in this book,
Another couple of real world things, because we're seeing the climate crisis here. We're seeing snow and fire and water, and it's getting pretty fierce in the Discworld. Well,
there's an ice age. I mean, this is like there's
yeah,
straight up climate change in this book. Let's be real, like, you know.
yeah. And I think that's, I mean, it's good dramatic grist, but I'm inclined to think, and you can tell me and listeners, that this is something Terry cared very passionately about. This was a very intentional choice for focus as well as being thematically true. There was a sharp increase in global temperatures in the early 80s, and this came to a critical point in 1988 when this book was published. Global warming was in the spotlight. The summer of '88 was the hottest on record, although there's been many hotter since. You've got widespread drought, wildfires. You've got it's come to light Shell and Exxon had their own internal reports done into climate crisis. Shell's in 1988, and they found that CO2 could double even earlier by 2030. And the following year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was established by the UN. So it was, even way back then, it was still a headline thing. It might not have been, it wasn't treated as seriously as now, but it was on a lot of people's concerns, greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, back then, everybody was still using deodorant from a spray.
Oh yeah, the old hole in the ozone layer was a thing. Yeah,
that's much less. There's been a decline in that type of behavior.
Yeah, I love that. Like, people here are like skeptical about climate change. Like, oh, you never hear about the hole in the ozone layer anymore. It's like, yeah, because we fucking fixed it. Like, everybody decided we're just not going to do that anymore. So, like, let's just keep doing that, if you please. So, yeah, I mean, this is something that Terry cares about, from I recall, in terms of the causes. I know you've been at it. It's not something that is left alone in this book. Like, choose my words carefully, of course, but you've obviously seen, you know, a little bit with the witches and stuff, and their relationship with nature. And we know we're going to read a lot more about nature. I'm sorry. You know that we're going to read a lot more about witches, and that relationship will be explored. So, yeah, the thinking about, like, what is essentially man-made climate change happening on the disc. That's what this is, isn't it?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
People's lust, wizards' lust for power is destroying the planet. And this is back in 1988. So, yeah, ahead of its time, perhaps, and dilutes a point that I want to come to later, perhaps, as well. But
well, you have as an argument to make, because that was beautifully put. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's something that I hadn't really considered until I saw it in your notes, and now, having chatted it out, I'm kind of with you on it, and thinking about Discworld and Terry's writing in the round. It makes sense that, especially given that context that I didn't really know about, I guess, about that specific period of time, and about how people's minds were being focused on climate change in the late 80s. It just seems obvious now, you know.
Pages 200 to 236.
All out thamaturgical war. The city of Quirm, Abram, the Hat, and the Tower of Alkali fall. Rincewind returns to the library and makes a firm decision. Karina's party summons a genie, whose lamp takes him to Ankh and horse rustling. Some very special horses. Warning coin of the dungeon dimensions. Karin makes a stand and pays the price. So, again, I'm just amazed by the amount of plot.
Yeah.
in 36 pages.
36. Boom, 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 boom.
I wonder what's driving this, because I feel like not as much was happening per page in previous books. I guess because, like, the whole world wasn't ending in previous books. Maybe that has something to do with it. So we're going to jump in. So we get to see the four horsemen, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I love to meet the four horsemen a lot more than I love to meet the genie. I thought he was like trying to do something with the genie that didn't quite land. Like, was he meant to be a estate agent or something like that?
Yeah, I like that. I think I like some of the genie stuff, but I think it's stretched a little.
Yeah. Is it got an 80s vibe? Is it like one of those, like, white jacket wearing, big mobile phone having 80s double glazing salesman? Is that what it's meant to be? Or
it could be a yuppie genie.
Yeah. It's a little before my time, I hesitate to say, you know, like,
joke with the answer phone and 2 to 3 weeks and in the middle of an apocalypse is kind of documentary. isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a specific reference. It's not one that particularly lands with me, but it's always good to see the horsemen. They get to get drunk as well. I
Well,
love
they're great fun, and those little sections are maybe half a page each. There's about 5 of them, 6 of them, and they're great. They're really because they're just dropped in.
yeah.
We don't actually need to see them, but they're a guilty pleasure, which are quite welcome. And
I prefer
stealing
them.
their
Yeah.
horses is a master stroke in terms of both trick and plot.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
really great.
So that's a bit of a bug. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine when it comes to screenwriting. Is causality. Is in your A story, particularly, events all should be linked causally. What happens over here should have a direct effect on the next plot point, which should have a direct effect on the next. So when we have cutaways like this that are really fun to read, but also have a direct effect on the A plot, and that these are the horses that they steal, which they then ride to the ice giants. That's all super. I love that, and that's why I much prefer them to the cutaways of the luggage, who's just has to be gone or the plot's broken. And obviously it's not much of a spoiler to say that Death is a major character in Discworld, so we're likely to meet the horsemen again, and this is just a really fun introduction to them. And I just love when Terry writes mythical beings getting drunk. It's great. Just love it.
And actually it does work in plot because it tells us why they're not sorting out their job, which is the apocalypse has been raging all book long.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're pissed.
Yeah, and you're like, well, this is the kind of world where the 4 horsemen would turn up, and you're like, well, you can't because we stole their horses and now they're really drunk. Yeah, fantastic.
Right, let's move it along to the final 23 pages. Coin imprisons gods. Rincewind has a sock and a half brick, setting father and son to blows. Kanina and Nigel face off against the ice giants. Rincewind sacrifices himself so Coin can flee the dungeon dimensions. Fuck me.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. I sort of feel that he's like, right, I'm a professional writer now. I've just got to throw as much story. I'm not doing my job properly if I don't throw as much story at the page as possible. So, gosh, where to begin? Interesting to see ice giants. It's like a direct lift from Norse mythology, I think, which is rare.
We've had a lot of hints about the ice giants and their problems with the gods and stereos. Yeah. And it's nice to see them pop up and the enormity of them, that they are landscapes. They are so
that was cool.
Ants.
Yeah, and again, this being a new me thinking I know everything there is to know about Discworld, but then reading this book for the first time and getting to see the ice giants for the first time was cool.
For me, the big climax moment, and I think you love it too, is Rincewind with the sock and the half brick. That's not the big finale, but it could well as be. It's just so small and rough.
Should have been, I argue.
It's
because the actual Rincewind with the half brick trying to take out the sorcerer, it's a great moment, and I do sort of buy him coming back because he knows the world's gonna end and he quite enjoys being alive, and he gets worked up and sort of puts him in a place where a coward might actually do this world saving action. I kind of buy that just about.
Well, I mean, the image of Rincewind with the sock and half brick and the approach is inspired, no doubt. But that it's not the end, that he doesn't go through with it and he starts talking to Coin. And let's face it, at this point, Coin and Ipslore are not going to be brought down by force. So that conversation between Rincewind and Coin is very well handled. And given the differences between Coin and everybody else, it's so well handled and it feels so organic, their chemistry. Yeah,
that was a surprise because I felt the whole way through the book, I was like, why are we not spending more time with Coin? He's a big antagonist, he's an interesting character. We're spending way more time with Creosote than we are with Coin. I don't really get it. But when Rincewind and Coin came together, and you could kind of see those two characters finding empathy with each other and finding that middle ground that sort of leads them towards the finale, I thought that was really well handled. I've got, when we come to do our favorite quotes, I will enlighten you, and it's a part of that moment. I thought it was quite sweet. That said, though, like we're back in the dungeon dimensions again. You know, we're having a big magical fight with interdimensional what's names. I mean, it's the best one yet. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it is. It probably pips the equal rights one for me, but there are overlaps there.
Yeah.
You can't fight them. It's the same idea. Like the only way to beat these things, you can't fight them with magic. You got to hit them with a half sock full of something, full of sand. I think the second time, isn't it?
It's a bit of a corner because you can't do the apocalypse without the dungeon dimensions.
I guess. But
so
it's
Rincewind is dead at the end of the book, or seemingly dead.
We're stuck in the dungeon dimensions. Well, now you know what happens when a wizard dies.
More. Yeah, so it's a to be continued of sorts.
But also, I mean, death doesn't come from him. Like we know when a wizard dies, death shows up with the scythe, and like that hasn't happened by the last page of the book. It's not to say that it's not going to happen, but just to make sure that there are definitely no spoilers.
That's our clue.
Well, I say nothing anyway. I sort of knew. I think vaguely because of I don't want to give too much away. I had a vague idea of the ending of this book of like where Rincewind was going to be by the end of it.
Right. Okay.
I wasn't quite sure how he got there. So that was cool to learn actually, because it was something I'd been vaguely aware of for like a long time. So it was actually cool to read the sequence where he gets stuck in the dungeon dimensions. And yeah, it was a lot more touching than I thought it was going to be, and how he kind of buys coin time to get back and set everything right and stuff. And yeah, Rincewind, you know, as kind of reluctant as I was to go back to him in this book, having, you know, finally got started with the witches and got started with death, then to go back to Rincewind, I was a bit lukewarm on it. But he's like, this is the coolest Rincewind's ever been for me. The end of this book with his half brick in his sock and he like sacrificing himself to save a kid. You're like, okay, man, you're cool now.
What a way to go out, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So we're coming up to about an hour. Any final thoughts on Sourcery?
Final thoughts? Yeah. I've had a bit of a revelation about these early books from reading this. So I figured out, I think, why they irk me a little bit, these early ones, especially the Rincewind ones. For me, like what's good about Discworld, what attracts me to Discworld is that it kind of uses fantasy as a tool to satirize the real world, our world. But these early books, I feel like they're a satire of fantasy as a genre. And I just don't care as much about that. Like, I'm not a big fantasy fan. It's not a criticism of Sir Terry, because that's what he wanted to write at this stage. He was big into fantasy and he wanted to send it up, which is grand, but I just find it a bit hard to care about wizards doing wizard stuff or barbarians doing barbarian stuff. Like, even if we are doing it in a funny way, so I'm just not invested in that genre. It's like if you don't like Star Wars and you sit down to watch Spaceballs, or if you don't read superhero comics and you sit down to read Watchmen or Astro City or something like that, I think. So yeah, so I think there's just like a slightly different tack with these early books that are just not what they're not hitting the tone that I think of when I think Discworld. So, but that's just, I mean, that's me. That's just my background, I guess. Is like, I'm not reading a lot of Conan the Barbarian. Like, I'm not reading a lot of the Wheel of Time or like any of these kind of things, I guess. Like, in many ways, like my introduction as an adult to reading fantasy was reading Discworld. Like, I'd read Lord of the Rings, but pretty much nothing else. So yeah. So like, I feel like that's, I don't really want to read a satire of fantasy. I want to read a satire of the real world that just happens to be a fantasy.
And Sorcery seems to belong much more to the light fantastic, the color of magic. I love the hell out of it. Had a really great read with it. The pacing was a key thing in that he sticks to the apocalypse. You could call it apocalypse, but Sorcery is a much better title. There's a lot of stuff about Rincewind and psychology and how he compartmentalizes his thoughts and the different voices in that. I really wish we had another half hour and preparation to get into, because yeah, I'm probably just as interested in mapping Rincewind's head as a Discworld.
Yeah, well, they did a science of Discworld series. Maybe we can do a psychology of Discworld series when we get down the line somewhere.
Well, yeah, that would be great.
Do you want to throw out a favorite quote?
I don't actually have mine selected yet. So do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So like a lot of this book didn't click with me until this exchange, which is near the end when Coin and Rincewind meet. And Coin says to Rincewind, I don't know what to do, he said. No harm in that. I've never known what to do, said Rincewind with hollow cheerfulness. Been completely at a loss my whole life. He hesitated. I think it's called being human. So that exchange just does loads with very little in terms of like establishing why these two characters can relate to each other and why Coin decides to stop destroying the world and why Rincewind decides to kind of save Coin. It's just like they both just have a moment of connection over like what the human condition is, which is quite beautiful, I think. You're gonna like throw out a funny fart joke or something now as your favorite quote, just to lighten the mood, I hope.
I don't actually have anything selected.
We
Hold
can
on.
cut
What
it.
are your other ones? I'll
No,
steal
that's it.
yours.
No, I just picked one.
Damn. I went to do this last night and I got distracted.
There was a type of thief that could steal the initiative the moment and the words right out of your mouth. I like that. I like the type of thief that could steal the initiative. I think that's a good line.
For me, there were a lot of great quotes in the book, but I couldn't actually settle on one. So as I read Sourcery in Amsterdam, I am going to go with the Hashishim, who derived their name from the vast quantities of hashish they consumed, were unique amongst vicious killers in being both deadly and at the same time inclined to giggle, groove to interesting patterns of light and shade on their terrible knife blades, and in extreme cases, fall over.
Yeah, that's good. There you go. Bringing in that Arabian Night stuff back into it. That tallies with your experience in Amsterdam, obviously. Just exactly what it was like. Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. Interestingly, like talking about the books made me like it more. I was a bit down on it at the start, as you can tell. I'm impatient, I think, to move on from this phase into that next phase of Discworld that I guess I was describing before. But that's not to be said that there's not a lot of good stuff here that's worth enjoying.
The Josh Kirby cover for Sourcery is very similar in composition to what he's doing in Mort.
Yeah.
On the front, particularly, it's a magic carpet with all the figures piled on top of it, and I feel quite ghastly. And I think the Kirby covers work with the color. That's color and pattern, and probably best not to look too much beyond that. I mean, the back cover is a bit more interesting than it is on Mort.
That tends to be the way with a few of them. There's a bit of a discussion going on the Discworld subreddit. Well, for me, recording this now, it was yesterday, but recently, let's say, just about like how mental these covers are and how sometimes they don't even like really relate that well to the characters or to the story. And somebody had dug up a quote where basically it was related that Josh Kirby didn't read the books and basically just went off a vague description and didn't take any input from Terry just because like he was an established illustrator. He'd like illustrated all these big fantasy and sci-fi books, so he just like did his own thing. So if I think for anybody who's not like super engaged with him, like a bit like myself, you just go, well, look, that's okay. Kirby's things over here, Terry's things over here. One just happens to be wrapped around the other, and you can dig it, or you can just pretend it doesn't exist. And lots of people do both. So,
our video listeners will have noticed that I use a lot of the alt covers, and I'd really like to know more about those. The other people bringing their illustrative, usually minimalist perspectives. Like when did those come about? Who are the chief artists? So write and let us know. We are, and just write and let us know about loads of stuff. We are on email at iveneverreaddiscworld at gmail.com. We're on Twitter and Facebook. I think also YouTube at Discworld GNU.
Yep, that's also our Twitter
Add that
as
to
well.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah, you can comment on YouTube. You can comment on the podcast providers, I think, as well.
Yep. We have been running polls and Q&As, but nobody's really interested, so I might not bother. PJ, how do you feel about a Mastodon account?
I feel like an old man because I don't know how it works, but I'm
let's do it. Let's screw Twitter. Up yours, Elon.
I know. I do feel a bit dirty on Twitter, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah.
Mastodon coming soon.
That's it.
Let's go postal.
Do it, yes.
Some love on YouTube from Henry Chamberlain and Peter Hill, who says, I've been loving this series. Keep it up. Yay.
We shall.
Good response to my pictures of reading Sourcery in Amsterdam. We've got some regular reader mail. Would you like to open this one, PJ?
By all means, from Simpsons fan Roasty Buns on Twitter. Finally finished off the More podcast. Another great episode. Love the character of Death. I think he is one of the most unique characters in pop culture. Question for the boys, though. It's not related to Discworld. It was the franchise that made me think of it. If you could experience one piece of media all over again for the first time, what would it be? Single things only, not series. So if you said, for example, Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, you'd still retain all your memories of the first and third. Interesting. I like the very clear rules in that as well.
That's a bit of a toughie, Roasty Buns.
Do you want me to keep reading and you can come back to it? I know what it is.
Yeah, let's.
So from Matt Burley on Audible, thank you. I'm not a university challenge level Discworld bore. I've never been to a Project fan site or participated in said pastimes. Discworld is, however, a close companion that, along with Hitchhikers, had a dramatic and lasting effect on my brain. This podcast is almost exactly the conversation I've had repeatedly over the years with any poor unsuspecting person that gets separated from the group in a pub. This exact conversation is why I have never had a complete set of books. I've listened to many podcasts I like, love, or identify with, but never one I've wanted to join in with so much. Thanks, chaps. Oh, that is really nice, Matt. I really appreciate that. And I think you get the vibe that we're going for. So it's lovely to know that somebody gets us, man.
Thanks, Matt.
Yes. Keep listening. Awesome. Right. So that's enough time to think. You got to answer Roasty Buns.
Roasty Buns. I would, only because it's been on my mind recently, I would like to experience again. It's not a single one.
Well, that has to be a single one. You can't break the rules immediately.
What about a DVD box set that's like only 6 episodes? That's under 3 hours.
Okay, yeah. If it's under 3 hours, because that's the Lord of the Rings movie, I'll give you that.
I'm going to go with Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Oh, that's a good choice. Okay. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so for me, it's Aliens, the second Alien movie. Because I'm really bad at consuming media in the correct order, as we've learned. I first saw Aliens before I saw Alien, and I kind of didn't get it. It muddled a few things up in my mind about the world and the story. So if I could forget Aliens and then watch it again, having not seen it, but having seen Alien and actually watching it for the first time in the right order, I think that would be like.
Do you know I did that with The Empire Strikes Back? It was the last film that I saw after the other two.
Okay.
Because there's only been 3 Star Wars films, and so yeah, The Empire Strikes Back was really strong. It was quite.
But so, like, you saw Return of the Jedi without seeing Empire Strikes Back? And how was it? Was it like?
Yeah, there's no cliffhanger for me.
Yeah. Like, why is he fucking safe in Darth Vader? Oh my god. Okay, well that's a conversation for another time, right there. Great question.
Why is Boba Fett so popular?
Yeah, like boom, straight away. Man, there's like a whole separate podcast format in that, isn't there? Roasty Buns will talk. Your people talk to my people. We'll get that set up. Is that it? Is there more?
I think that's probably pretty much it. There was just a question I put out on Twitter quite broadly. Where be parts of Discworld fan culture spoiler free? And Prep Chat Podcast got back to us with a few recommendations for a virgin like myself.
Oh, good.
So if you know of somewhere that's going for similar sort of vibe that we are, no spoilers, please come to us. And
that's a tough one.
Discworld GNU for stuff and things. PJ, unless you have anything else, what's our next book?
Oh, good question. Pause. Standby caller. Discworld publication order. Discworld books in order. So the next book is Weird Sisters. Back to Witches.
Weird Sisters.
Yeah.
A pretty iconic one, that.
Yes, indeed. And there's man.
Hey.
Great. We get to see Granny again. We get to meet the Covet. I'm excited.
Shh. No spoilers.
That's
so
it. I'm done.
Write us about anything up to Sourcery.
Yes.
And yeah, in the week before the 20th of February, we want to hear about the Weird Sisters, because I'll be ready.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Might start very soon.
Wow. Yes, same here.
Okay. PJ, do you want to?
No, I get to say.
You get to say.
I have read Sourcery. I have read Discworld. Andy.
I have read Sourcery and I've read Discworld-ish.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're chipping away. Until next time, folks, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month for Weird Sisters.
Thank you.